what's going on here is that the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path. And the end result is that Ukraine is going to get wrecked. And I believe that the policy that I'm advocating, which is neutralizing Ukraine and then building it up economically and getting it out of the competition between Russia on one side and NATO on the other side, is the best thing that could happen to the Ukrainians. What we're doing is encouraging the Ukrainians to play tough with the Russians. We're encouraging the Ukrainians to think that they will ultimately become part of the West, because we will ultimately defeat Putin and we will ultimately get our way. Time is on our side. And of course, the Ukrainians are playing along with this. And the Ukrainians are almost completely unwilling to compromise with the Russians and instead want to pursue a hardline policy. Well, as I said to you before, if they do that, the end result is that their country is going to be wrecked. And what we're doing is, in effect, encouraging that outcome. I think it would make much more sense for us to work to create a neutral Ukraine. It would be in our interest to bury this crisis as quickly as possible. It certainly would be in Russia's interest to do so. And most importantly, it would be in Ukraine's interest to put an end to the crisis.
I think watching this video was very important before I start my own video about the current situation in Ukraine, because we need to understand that there are third parties or a big elephant in the room that is NATO, which has pushed Ukraine to the brink of a war with Russia. Have they done it intentionally? In my estimation, yes, because all the political analysts, geostrategists, geopolitical experts, advisors, security advisors to the successive US presidents, to the Pentagon, they have warned the United States that the expansion of NATO into Ukraine is a red line, a red line for Russia, regardless of the president. It doesn't matter if it's Putin or not Putin. It is unacceptable for Russia and its national security and its aspirations to become a global power to expand your hardware and install them in Ukraine. Now, it seems that the so-called allies of Ukraine in the West, they have gone against the recommendations of their own experts. And now we have a very dire situation in Ukraine where the people, and only the people, are paying the high price. But for us today, I think it's important to check the map of control over Ukraine. We are the 2nd of March 2022. And as you can see, after the recognition of Putin of Donetsk and Lugansk, the forces supported by Russia, the ethnic Russian forces who live in Donetsk and Lugansk, are advancing in the administrative borders in these two independent countries. And they are trying to push away the militias backed by Kiev. Now, it's very important, in my opinion, for the Russians to capture these two areas that they claim now to be independent. And from there, it seems that their plan is to expand and move towards the western border with Donetsk, and namely into Mariupol. And we have to understand that Mariupol is one of the headquarters for the neo-Nazi forces in Ukraine, and especially the Azov Brigade. In 2014 and 2015, when the Russians supported the separatists in Donetsk and Lugansk, and they were trying to advance into Mariupol, it was the Nazi group of Azov that was capable of pushing away the Russian separatists, or the separatists supported by Russia. And back then, the Ukrainian army has collapsed in this part, and they have resorted to and supported the neo-Nazi groups there in order to push away, as I mentioned, the separatists. But as we can see now, the bombing campaign is concentrated on Mariupol, And the Russian forces, they're trying to advance from Donetsk into Berdyansk. So they want to close this geography here, and by doing so, they will be able to seal the entire Azov Sea here. And then we can come and see what's happening in the northern part of Crimea. And we can see that the Russian forces are advancing into the northern part of Crimea, and they are in the region of Zaporizhia. And after that, if we, in my opinion, see the strategy or the military tactics of Russia in Syria and compare it with Ukraine, I think the Russian forces are trying to make an advance towards the city of Mykolaiv, and by doing so, they are trying to advance towards Odessa. Why would they do that? So after sealing the Azov Sea, they are trying to seal the entire Black Sea in front of Ukraine. And by doing so, they will transform Ukraine into an inland country with no access to the international waters, because the Black Sea is your access also into the Mediterranean through Turkey. Now, if we go a little bit to the north, we will see that the Russian forces aren't carpet bombing Kiev, but they are trying to pave the way for their forces that are advancing from the north to the south of this area, and they're moving forward to Kiev. Now, I don't see a serious attempt by Russia yet to capture Kiev. However, they are bombing strategic locations and infrastructure, and they're trying to cut the media support for the Ukrainian forces or the forces supported by Kiev there. Now, if we want to see the strategy of the United States or the NATO in general, in my opinion, they are not well established. They're not really well established like the Russian one. For example, the West in general, or NATO, is using the media power in a very professional way. And if we see the statistics that they share about the casualties of the Russian side, we will realize that there are grave exaggerations about this issue. However, the media power is very strong, and they are able to mobilize the people in Western countries and try to mobilize the people into the streets to protest against the Russian attack against Ukraine. Now, the West also banned the media outlets that operate under the Russian flag, especially Russia Today and Sputnik, and we all know that these outlets are the mouthpiece of Russia. However, banning these outlets just indicate the true, or shows the true color of the so-called liberal elites in political elites in Brussels, because if you are concerned about misinformation, and of course the Russian side or the RT are biased towards Russia, try to counter it with your true information, right? And this also, in my opinion, ends all these claims that the EU or the NATO side are for free speech and for free media. Now, NATO was in front of big challenges. Are they going to provide anti-tank missiles? Are they going to provide anti-aircraft missiles? Are they going to provide ammunition or maybe some other equipment? What's happening is here now, the European and American countries are providing Ukraine with anti-tank missiles, which is a defensive weaponry. They are providing them with manpads, anti-aircraft systems, because they cannot provide them with air defense system that they will be destroyed in a matter of seconds by the Russians. And they don't even have most of the air defense bases in Ukraine have been occupied or neutralized by Russia, and Russia is in full control of the skies of Ukraine at the moment. Therefore, it is not practical to send them anti-aircraft. However, they are sending lots of ammunition, of course, And if we see the statement, for example, of the foreign minister of the UK, she said that she doesn't mind and she encourages that the volunteers from the West would go to Kiev or to Ukraine in order to fight the Russian invasion. And we also see that the Western media nowadays are also, once again, they have remembered the so-called rebels in Syria, and they are they are trying to portray them as heroes. And one of the so-called militants in Syria who allegedly destroyed over 100 Russian tanks, according to the Western media, of course, he wants to go to Ukraine in order to fight against the Russians. So if we see this pattern, we may come to the conclusion that NATO is transferring Ukraine into quagmire for the Russian forces, similar to what they did in Afghanistan in late 70s and early 80s. They may transfer Ukraine into a nest for the neo-Nazis and the right-wing nationalists in Europe against Russia, and also the jihadists, the Islamists. So these two strong ideologies could combine forces in Ukraine against Russia. And this is not a conspiracy theory. The NATO has an access to the jihadists in Syria, and they have an access to the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, such as Azov and the National Battalion. So they are unable to provide air force because they were thinking of giving some air jets, fighter jets, that could use the Polish airports to fight against the Russian forces, but that means that Poland will be dragged into war, and Poland is a NATO member. So they're not doing that. What they're doing is exactly what I mentioned. They're trying to make Ukraine a quagmire where Russia has to fight against a resistance for many years, and this will definitely exhaust the Russian economy, and therefore it will destroy the Russian dream to become a superpower again. And the latest interview of, for example, Hillary Clinton in this regard, I think it was on MSNBC, it indicates clearly that the West is pursuing this strategy in Ukraine.
But remember, the Russians invaded Afghanistan back in 1980. And although no country went in, they certainly had a lot of countries supplying arms and advice, and even some advisors to those who were recruited to fight Russia. It didn't end well for the Russians. There were other unintended consequences, as we know. But the fact is that a very motivated and then funded and armed insurgency basically drove the Russians out of Afghanistan. Obviously, the similarities are not ones that you should bank on, because the terrain, the development in urban areas, et cetera, is so different. But I think that is the model that people are now looking toward. And if there can be sufficient armaments that get in, and they should be able to get in along some of the borders between other nations and Ukraine, and keep the Ukrainian, both their military and their citizen volunteer soldiers supplied, that can continue to stymie Russia. Now, let's be clear that Russia has overwhelming military force. But of course, they did in Afghanistan as well. They also brought a lot of air power to Syria. It took years to finally defeat Syria in terms of the insurgencies, the democratic forces, as well as others who battled the Russians, the Syrians, and the Iranians. So if you're fighting for your homeland, you're fighting for your family, you're fighting for your ideals, that's far more powerful than sending in these poor, young Russian soldiers who didn't even know where they were going until they crossed the border and people were screaming at them and they realized they were in Ukraine. So I think we have to watch this carefully. We have to provide sufficient military armaments for the Ukraine military and volunteers, and we have to keep tightening the screws.
So this was in short. I tried to sum up the situation in Ukraine. I think Russia, the time is not in favor of Russia, and they're trying to capture the south, the belt that they can seal the Azov Sea and the Black Sea. That's a priority for them, and then they may increase the pressure on Kiev. I think a regime change in Kiev by Russia will satisfy Russia, and I'm not encouraging for anything. I think the Ukrainian people deserve to live in peace, and I think Ukraine should be neutral, and it should be excluded from this madness of struggle for power between NATO and Russia over this country. Ukrainians are victims, and now, unfortunately, after 9 to 8 years of the so-called revolution, the West has turned, or NATO has turned Ukraine into a position that it has to fight against Russia alone, as we have seen the video before this, before I started talking in this video. And now they're trying to make Ukraine a quagmire for Russia, and it seems that they don't mind turning Ukraine into dust as long as they can reach their geopolitical and strategic goals in Eastern Europe, which is endangering and threatening the entire international security, as Russia is also on a high nuclear alert at the moment. And the last thing the world needs is a world war. If there were 68, I think, million people dead in World War II, the numbers will be way beyond 100 million people dead. So I hope that the leaders in the West and Russia sit on a table and talk and neutralize Ukraine from this madness, and they stop intervening in the internal affairs of this country, and they sign on a security agreement that guarantees both the NATO and the Russian security, so that no one is threatening the other side. When economic relations are established and economies are integrated, the possibility of war will decrease. And that's what we as humans of this world should seek and pursue for in order to establish a lasting peace. I've been your host, Kevork Almassian of Syrian Analysis. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And maybe you want to support me on Patreon, link in the description below. And see you next time.